Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Orlando, Florida, covering the Air Force Association's annual Air Warfare Symposium, the #1 winter meeting of the United States Air Force leadership, industry executives, thought leaders, media, and more down here in Florida. Our coverage here is sponsored by Leonardo DRS and L3 Technologies. And every year, one of the highlights of this conference, or at least over the last 2 years, has been the Spark Tank competition for innovation. And I'm going to go down the road. Dave Harden, Colonel in the United States Air Force, is the CEO and the founder of AFWERX, the innovative lab down in Austin, where you guys are working on innovative and thoughtful solutions. Lauren Knausenberger, who is the Spark Tank director of this awesome competition, Air Force-wide competition, to get 6 folks to this moment. And then John Moss, who's a Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force, who's the winner from the 52nd Civil Engineering Squadron in sunny Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany. I'm sorry, any base that's just universally known as Spang is pretty cool, especially because it was an old Luftwaffe base, but let's not get into some of the historical details. So let's talk, Lauren, about this year's competition. None other than Mark Cuban. You had a real shark tanker here, entrepreneur. He knocked it out with General Wilson, the vice chief, and we talked about that conversation a little bit. Talk to us about this year's competition, how this year's competition is different from last year's and the 6 competitors.
Sure. So I didn't think that it could have gotten any more exciting than last year, but we really did raise the bar. And just the energy in the room was awesome. The audience was so engaged. Everyone was rooting for these airmen, and they just nailed it. They did such a fabulous job. And we also did have Mark Cuban and George Steinbrenner IV on stage, higher profile judges, made it even more exciting for the teams, and also had some really interesting feedback from both of them. With Mark pushing back in very candid ways, as only Mark can do, and with George just being so supportive, but coming up with really insightful advice. And of course, the Secretary Chief and the Chief Master Sergeant did an incredible job. So what we did differently this year was we actually had folks submit their ideas on an ideation platform. So it was a lot easier to submit. We had over 300 submissions, which was wild. Last year we had about 80, I want to say. And it was just more transparent. So if you put forward an idea, everyone can see your idea. Everyone can help you make it better and curate it over time. But you can also be automatically matched with folks that have the same idea. So we had a couple people say, hey, here's the problem with your idea. We're actually doing that at our base. We've already solved that problem. Come partner with us. Let's do this together. And so that's awesome. And that's something that we solved without even needing to get on stage and do it. So that was exciting. As far as the pitches themselves, so we had the M1 cargo parachute failsafe. That one was a lot of fun. Little poke at a more expensive solution from an Army lab that the Air Force leaders were pulling on.
No good-natured rivalry there at all.
None at all. None at all. I also love the Vice Chief's question to Mark Cuban. Hey, Army or Air Force? Mark, of course, responded, hey, I thought you were going to ask me smart questions, So, but that one really, it's for about $1. He 3D printed a part that will help us go from 2% failure rate to 0% failure rate and eliminate over $1 million worth of cargo destruction in a year when the parachute prematurely goes. We also had John with his amazing chemical detector. Just the crazy thing about that is, so we have chemical detectors at bases, and they have to change their batteries every 12 hours. And that is an airman's job. And so thank goodness for John, who saw that this was crazy and developed a renewable energy solution that he can tell you more about. We also had Lexi, which is a weather app. It's a cadet from USAF who basically said, look, it's crazy that I'm spending 45 minutes getting data points from hundreds of different data points from different sources and manually pulling this together. So there's an app for that now called Lexi. And so on one hand, we've heard this story before, get the data, get it to a middle place, but when you're trying to fly a mission, you have to act fast. You can't wait 45 minutes for a weather report. These guys are taking off one way or another, and just hopefully they have the right information. So we also had an adaptive basing project, which is kind of like a fighter pit crew in a box. So instead of a crew of 50 people taking, a day to get a jet off the ground, these guys can do it in about 45 minutes with 7 folks. Everything you need in a trailer. And there was MQ-9, where they basically, so apparently when we test signals on an MQ-9, we literally pull an MQ-9 around a runway with a truck to test where the signal is dead. So we were joking that this is, can you hear me now, in a tactical case. So instead of towing an MQ-9, it's still pretty big. It's still maybe kind of that size, and still 200 pounds. But their plan is to move it down to the size of a laptop. Wow. And I think I'm missing one.
Let's see. The only one we were missing was the
Iris, yes. And that one, it's a respirator mask. And so there are a lot of respirator masks. You can breathe underwater and you can communicate. You can communicate from an airplane, but we don't have solutions for communicating inside a gas tank. Right. And a lot of that is because it generates a spark. Right. Spark in a gas tank is not a great thing. Right. And so their ask was to prototype and to change some of the masks to accommodate that.
Wow. Each one of these ideas is so good, and you could say that each one in their own right should be a winner. But John, you nailed it. So walk us through first the problem, because when you said how many, so talk to us about the detector, how many batteries the detector costs, how often airmen have to go and change batteries, because I don't think anybody joined the United States Air Force to be almost a professional battery changer.
Well, and John, I think you need to show us this trophy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
3D printed,
awesome.
by the way.
Wow. Right, and was this done by AFWERX, actually? Yeah. Wow. Well done, Dave. So, John, so tell us, tell us about the problem. Tell us about how you came up with the solution. What was your inspiration moment, and really the solution, and sort of the cost trade-off, right? Like why you're actually spending a little bit more money, but actually saving money.
Yeah, so absolutely. One of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force's priorities was to get back to readiness. And so the bases were starting to do exercises again to be able to survive and operate in contested environments. What we started seeing is that airmen were having to change out batteries of these joint chemical agent detectors, and it was just killing them manpower-wise, and it was costing us a lot of money. So over a year time frame, in installation, airmen could spend 2,900 man-hours and up to 116,800 AA batteries for every year of operation. So that made me think of this solution, and it's a renewable energy power supply for that detector. And that allows them to run that detector 24/7 with very minimal user maintenance.
And you were changing those batteries every 12 hours?
Every 12 hours. We had to have a two-man teams go out and change out 40 detectors.
And so talk to us about the solution that you have, because there's solar, there's a battery. Talk to us about runtime, right? Because the reason, it's sort of like after every patrol, everybody changes out the batteries because, you want your NVGs. So it doesn't really matter how depleted they are, you're automatically changing them to make sure that you're fresh. So there's a reason behind, there's method to the madness. That having been said, talk to us about how your system changes that dynamic entirely.
So we added 4 levels of redundancy to this. So if airmen have some options now, if they have commercial power, they can plug this into commercial power. If we lose commercial power after an attack, then the solar panels will continue to recharge that internal battery pack that we have. And if we have no sun like we do in Germany in the wintertime, we'll still get another 60 hours of runtime out of our renewable energy power supply. If that dies, we still have an additional 12 hours within the internal battery pack of the detector. So really what we're doing is we're giving airmen options to be able to keep those detectors running.
And what's the form, fit, factor, and also more importantly, the cost of this, that makes it such an attractive proposition, right, as you look at the whole balance, because you also have to factor in airmen's time as well.
Absolutely. So we were able to get this thing to less than 14 pounds. And hopefully working with AFWERX and the Spark Take program, we can actually develop solutions that allow us to make that even smaller, lighter, more agile, so that we can support combat operations.
Let me come to you, Dave. So in AFWERX, talk to us about how you guys are now, because the idea is to get the idea and then give the idea to you and then actually try to materialize, make that transformation. General Harris, who controls all the money, Lieutenant General, the least popular person here. I mean, everybody wanted to talk to the general.
Most popular.
No. I was saying the absolute most popular person here, right? That was a total joke. Everybody wants money from him. But talk to us a little bit about how you guys are going to take this idea, shepherd it, and get that out to the force, because that's the whole idea behind the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's exciting. If you saw the video, we were playing from Bach, who was the winner last year. He got to recreate his his experience, and it's amazing. So from last year's Spark Tank winner to by the end of FY19, we're literally going to have his idea prototyped, modified, tested, and rolled out to 440 aircraft in the fleet. Right, so that's from idea to implementation, which is unheard of.
And let me just say, that was a Master Sergeant who was a KC-135 boom operator, and for the instructors, they have to lay on the bare skin of the airplane, and that's very, very cold, drinks freeze, and so he was looking at a heated cushion pad because there were disability costs that were associated with folks in that sort of contorted position as they were training a new boom operator.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving the recap for that. So that's helpful. And so now with our new winner, we're going to go through a similar process, right? So it's all about learning, iterating, getting after it. So we'll start with the larger package, say, hey, what works, what doesn't. We'll bring them into AFWERX Vegas. They can go to the hub there, get with experts, SMEs, and then we'll say, hey, now we have something that works. Let's test it at a few bases. Okay, now how do we make it smaller? We'll start to work with the SPOs. We'll get with the acquisition community and figure out how to lay this out and transition it to the warfighter.
One of the things, Dave, that you've talked about is the necessity to have sort of honest conversations, honest discussion within the service with its acquisition, with its suppliers. What are the kind of conversations that have to happen for us to cross some of these innovative Rubicons? Everybody all the time is talking about innovation, but when you look at the needle is not moving as much as some people would like, given General Stafford, the legendary astronaut, Apollo 10 commander, was here, and he noted like how much was accomplished in a short period of time in a focused way. And now, we put man on the moon in 8 years. We're now, satisfying ourselves sometimes on some programs, and we think it's going fast, then it, in the context of something like that, was going painfully slowly.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight. So we have a real opportunity here, and there are cultural barriers, and we see it. And the beautiful thing about Spark Tank is the honest conversations that we have on stage. We had it last year, we had it this year. So to hear the SecAF saying, who's the SPO, right? I want to talk to them and get this done. Hey, talk to my acquisition folks. Let's get over this hurdle. Defense contractors, you need to get on board and help the Air Force, not just making money, but actually contributing to our warfighter when we have needs like this. If we can't plug into your system, figure out how to plug into your system. But most importantly, the most important thing, Vago, is that we have honest conversations about making sure that there is risk in saying no. And all of a sudden, on stage, there's risk in saying no, right? Because if someone in the organization before, they got promoted, I'm not going to take any risk, right? I'm not going to do that project. I have all these rule sets. I'm just not going to do it. They get promoted. There's no risk of failing, right? But that's not going to work anymore. And we're seeing that on stage. And now people are getting called out for saying no. So now the lawyer, the acquisition community, everybody else has to take a second thought and say, do I have to get to yes? Do I have to figure out another way? And when we start to change that decision matrix, we start to get after innovation.
And I'll add that this year we almost didn't have to call people out as much. People were ready to bring their business card to the stage.
Right.
There's something in your way. All right, we had Will Roper, our chief of acquisition, come up to the stage. Here you go. The test community. Yep. It was outstanding.
John, from your standpoint, how rewarding was this? I mean, do you feel that when there are great ideas, they do percolate to the top? I mean, is this a kind of an encouraging thing from the standpoint of a smart airman from Pandora, Ohio, who came up with a game-changing idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I was always the type of person where, like you said, there's cultural issues where, airmen may feel like they're limited in being able to express the ideas that they have. And this experience has changed my mind with that. Now I know that, hey, if I've got something, I can bring it to my supervisor, I can bring it to my commander, and they're going to listen.
Did you guys like the message that Mark Cuban delivered, which is don't be afraid of failure, just go out there and do it, that everybody has a great idea, but at some point they stop, and it's the people who actually say, like, hey, this is a great idea, let me actualize it? Does that, does that need to be a broader mantra?
I think the good news is over the past year, the dialogue in the Air Force has shifted. and we say this, not everyone understands fully what it means yet, but the dialogue is changing, and we do truly believe that.
Dave?
Everyone says fail forward, but they don't understand what failure means, right? And failure means that sometimes things go wrong, and then the leaders have to be okay with that. And we're still not there yet, right? So everyone wants 100% success. And if it doesn't succeed, then you failed. And that's not the answer. So we have to teach them about what failure means. And it's actually not failure, it's learnings, right? And so what we try to do and what we've done in a lot of our projects is say, you know what? Even though this AI algorithm might not work, guess what? We collected all of our data, and we did it for $1 million. And that would have been $10 million if we contracted it. We got to win. We learned something. And we were actually more cost effective than if we had never tried this project at all. And so when you start to capture what the wins are and what the learnings are, then you really can't fail by just moving forward.
Guys, I want to thank all of you. Colonel Dave Harden, who is the Chief Operating Officer of AFWERX, and I said earlier, Austin is one of the hubs. He's at the Pentagon. Lauren Knausenberger, who's the Spark Tank Director, but your full-time job is the Director of Innovation at Air Force Cyberspace. Thank you very, very much. And John Moss, Master Sergeant in the United States Air Force from the 52nd Civil Engineering Squadron in Spangdahlem Air Base, who is this year's 2019 Spark Tank winner for a brilliant idea that's, I'm sure, popular with every airman on every base who had to make sure a chemical detector is fed by batteries. Guys, thanks very, very much, and already looking forward to the 2020 Spark Tank.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.